In 1828, the spirit of Maria Martin sent visions to her stepmother of what became known as the Red Barn murder. After murdering his girlfriend, William Corder forged a letter to her family claiming she'd eloped with him. This seemed to account for her absence for a while, but then her stepmother Anne began having dreams. She believed these were visions sent to her by Maria. In these visions, she saw Maria being murdered out in their red barn. She knew her body was still hidden out there and insisted her husband go search for her. As much as they both wanted these visions to be nothing more than awful dreams, they were true. There Maria was, buried within a grain storage bin, wrapped in a sack with William's signature green handkerchief still around her neck, exactly the way his wife saw her in her visions. William was publicly hanged for his crime. His body was dissected and studied, and eventually his skin was tanned and used to bind a book containing an account of the murder. After battling a raging fire, the Chicago Fire Department discovered the body of 47-year-old Teresita Bassis. While she was discovered beneath a charred mattress, it was not the fire that killed her. There was a butcher's knife sticking out of her chest, and any clue as to who may have put it there had been consumed by the flames, leaving authorities stumped. Teresita's spirit was already on her own case. Apparently, she headed to the home of former co-workers Dr. Jose Chua and his wife Remy. Remy was a medium, and Teresita was able to channel her story through her. In Remy's voice, Teresita spoke and named Alan Showery as the man who murdered her. He also stole some jewelry on the way out. And once these specific pieces were found in the possession of Alan's girlfriend, police were then able to tie him to the scene of the crime. It was the winter of 1897 when Elva Zona Hester of Greenbrier County, West Virginia, died of what her autopsy claimed was everlasting faint. Her mother, Mary Jane Hester, wasn't buying it, and not just because of the cockamamie excuse for a coroner's report, might I add. Zona's ghost had actually returned from the great beyond to tell her mother what really went down, and her death was no accident or whatever everlasting faint means. It was her no-good drifter of a husband, Edward Stribling Trout Shoe, that killed her. Zona's spirit turned her head all the way around to demonstrate that he'd snapped her neck. Finally, a proper autopsy was performed, and they miraculously discovered Zona's neck had, in fact, been broken. Edward was found guilty of Zona's murder and sentenced to life in prison, although he only actually served 3 years before dying of some mysterious illness. Perhaps it was everlasting faint. After stabbing Catherine Ballesteros 33 times and robbing her home, the unknown assailant fled the scene confident they'd get away with what they'd done. They'd left handprints and footprints in blood all over the house. Police were hopeful this would lead them to the killer. However, the only way that would work is if they were already in the system. It didn't take police long to have their first solid lead, though. Catherine's spirit saw to that. She'd remained in the morgue with her grieving parents, where she whispered into her mother's ear the name Baba. This was the nickname for a well-known thief that lived in Catherine's neighborhood. The police had their suspect. Ryan Baba Viscara was apprehended, and his fingerprints and blood were a match to those found at the scene. He was eventually tried, found guilty, and sentenced to life in prison. Ashley Howley was just 20 years old when she disappeared, and police had nothing to go on. That is until Christy Robinette, a psychic medium, approached them. Apparently, Ashley's spirit paid Christy a little visit while she was sleeping and gave her all the grisly details about the murder and the location of her body. According to Christy, Ashley's ghost named her own boyfriend, Robert McMichael II, as her killer. Police had already long suspected that McMichael had something to do with her disappearance. Even a search of his property with dogs turned up nothing. But this was because her body was encased in cement in addition to being buried on the property. Once Christy gave police the location of Ashley's body, not only did McMichael confess to murdering her, he also confessed to murdering his own mother and her boyfriend. An Australian farmer named Frederick Fisher vanished back in 1826. Only his shady neighbor, George Worrell, had any insight to offer. According to George, Fred had to skip town and apparently had signed his entire farm over to him. Now, Fred wasn't exactly missing per se, he was dead. And his spirit had just about enough of the incompetence of local authorities, and after 4 months decided to take matters into his own hands. Fred's spirit got the opportunity to appear to a man named John Farley. In his spectral form, he pointed towards a nearby creek before vanishing. This led to the entire area being searched later. Fred's bloody and battered body was found in a shallow grave right where his ghost had pointed. George Worrell was quickly arrested, tried, and convicted of the murder. He was given a death sentence. A 3-year-old boy from the Golan Heights region of Syria not only claimed to remember his past life, but he also remembers being murdered. Even more incredible, he actually led his village elders to his remains, the murder weapon, and his killer. The boy went on to confront the man who killed his former self. He said he remembered they'd had a fight, and he remembered dying from a blow to the head with an axe. The accused man went pale, but didn't confess to the murder until after both the bones and weapon were recovered. The axe wound on the skull of the remains corresponds to the location of a long red birthmark on the child's head. The boy's full story has been documented in the book Children Who Have Lived Before, Reincarnation Today by German therapist Trutz Hardow.